the Honorable Richard Bernstein. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. I gotta say, Bart, that house sounds cool. Like, let me tell you something. I really like that, hidden, stairway. That's really cool. I like that. That sounds like a fantastic house, and that sounds like a great mortgage company. So
it is. I'm sure it's going to be snapped up in no time.
I want to tell you something. Even though I can't see, that house sounds really cool.
Good. I'm glad.
I can't see it, but I'm willing to bet that place is a really nice house. I have to also say, I love Jackson. I love it here so much. And whenever I get to come on your show, I just feel so at home. And I just want to tell you, this is such a fantastic town. And I have to tell you, I'm super excited because I really want to try to come to that hot air balloon festival. That sounds amazing. That's going to come next weekend.
Right.
That sounds cool. I've never been in a hot air balloon. All I can tell you is, how neat is that?
Yeah, it's pretty cool experience. If you
How
ever get
great
the chance,
is that?
yeah.
Do they let you ride in a hot air balloon?
No.
Because I would love that.
They will not be able to give rides. It's the one weekend that they aren't, but we do have a lot of balloons in Jackson that I'm sure we can arrange to get you up.
Can I just tell you, we should do a show about it. Because for a blind person in a balloon, I think that could be kind of cool. You know what I mean? It's kind of show where you're like, wait, the blind guy's in a balloon. That's kind of exciting. How about if they let the blind guy drive the balloon or steer the balloon? Let me tell you something. That would be an adventure.
Well, you know what? You can't steer it.
Oh, how do you do it?
The wind controls where you go. You can you can go up and down. That's the only power you have. You can't go front or back or left or right. It's
so
up to the wind.
It sounds like it would be perfect for me. It would be like how I drive a car, right?
It would be.
So I might not be able to drive a car, but I could drive a balloon. This could be my new thing, right?
No.
They won't let me on the highway, but I could actually be like a pilot of a balloon. This could be my new thing.
Now, you might be, because the sound, it's amazing when you're in a hot air balloon. What you hear, it's amazing. You can hear arguments coming from people's backyards,
really?
Even if you're 1,000 feet in the air.
Really?
Sound travels. So you might be able to, with sound, navigate.
I have to say, it just sounds really cool. It just sounds like, there's so many great things that are going on here in Jackson that it's such a great place. And you know what I'm fishing for? I want to see if I can get invited to go to a football game in the fall. So if we could find a way, I love high school football, and if we could find an opportunity that I could go to a high school football game, that would be amazing.
All right. Well,
if you could organize it,
we can do that.
A high school game in the fall here in Jackson, I just think it's the coolest. I just think, honestly, it is there's nothing that defines Michigan more than high school football on a Friday night here in Jackson. Can you think of anything better than just that awesome high school football experience when you go out to the game, you go and the whole town is there and there's incredible excitement and energy. I mean, high school football is the absolute best part of the fall.
I'm in full agreement. So, all right,
in.
We'll work on that.
Please, let's make that a priority.
All right.
That and the balloon. Boy, Bart, we got all kinds of stuff to do.
I know, this is, well,
I come with all kinds of assignments.
If you have time, because this is the year of the Supreme Court, both
the
U.S. Supreme Court and Michigan Supreme Court.
Yes.
Everyone's obviously aware of all that's happening.
That's why it'd be good to be in a hot air balloon.
To get away from it all.
Yeah, exactly. That's why the hot air balloon is going to come in beautifully.
It'll be a great escape.
Exactly.
Because ultimately there are going to be some cases. Now,
we might not, you know what, Bart? If I go on the hot air balloon, we might not come back. We might just, you said you can't really steer it. We might just fly away.
That's happened before.
Very tempting.
Yes. Around the world, you could go around the world.
Exactly.
So the states, the Supreme Court has thrown the abortion rights question back to the states.
Right.
So it's going to be back. It's here in Michigan. We've got a law that is on the books that is being interpreted a variety of ways. Mm-hmm. There's a potential ballot proposal that voters will be asked to look at in November. But from a procedural standpoint, what are the next steps
Absolutely.
following Roe v. Wade?
Okay, so I have to do the canons, because this is what judges do, right? Got to make sure that we go through the canons. And I just want to be very clear that I'm not going to be stating a position, right? Under no circumstance is this to be seen as a position whatsoever or an opinion on the merits. So as you asked the question beautifully, we're just talking about the procedure of the case, and I can go through that because this is a matter of public record. And again, I just have to state I won't be stating an opinion. I'm just going to be going through and explaining kind of the procedural aspects of the case. So where things are is, as your viewers know, the United States Supreme Court held that there is no constitutional protections. That's the ruling of the U.S. Supreme Court. What ultimately happens now is it goes back to the states, and the state Supreme Courts have to determine, is there, even though the U.S. Supreme Court has indicated that there is no constitutional protections under federal law, is there a protection under state law? You know, as we all know, there are 50 state constitutions, and is there any type of protection that is provided through the state constitutional, state constitution? And so ultimately, there are currently two cases that are working their way, and one, of course, people are probably familiar with is the governor's case, which is called an executive message, where the governor is asking for a declaratory judgment from the court. So that's one case. And there is a second case that is also moving through the system, which is a case that was brought by Planned Parenthood, and that case is currently in the Court of Claims. And ultimately, I would imagine that both of these cases are eventually going to find their way to the Michigan Supreme Court, where we will ultimately have to determine them on the merits. So really the emphasis is, again, without stating a position of any kind, those are the two cases that are currently here in the state of Michigan, which is that first one, which is the executive message case, which was filed by the governor, and then the second one is the Planned Parenthood case, and that case again is currently in the Court of Claims, and ultimately I would imagine over time we will see if that case will find its way to the Michigan Supreme Court for us to adjudicate that on the merits.
What do you think the timeline is? Because it's possible that none of this could happen before November.
That is a really good question, Bart. I think it's hard to say, because especially when you have two cases that are kind of moving through the process, and I imagine there will probably be more that will kind of move through the process. A lot of it is going to be determined as to what happens in the trial courts, and a lot of it's going to be determined what's going to happen in the Court of Appeals. And I think there's a lot of, there's a lot of logistics that kind of take hold in this. And remember, you have a lot of different stakeholders. And when you have a lot of different stakeholders, you're going to have a lot of briefing. And when you have a lot of briefing, that kind of takes time. But the one thing I think the people of the state of Michigan should really be assured of is that we have very good courts, and our courts do an excellent job. And I think that the most important point of how this is going to proceed is, again, I can't state a position, and I know I say it over and over, and I apologize for that, but it's really important for judges to follow all of the canons and make sure that we are in full compliance with our requirements. But I would have to say is that I think that as the cases kind of move through, I think people should be rest assured that the one thing the courts are really good at is making sure that all voices are heard, the law will be followed, and that the cases will be decided on the merits.
Yeah, and you can't give your opinion. I think a lot of people are confused because during the hearings for Justice Kavanaugh and Justice Barrett, they were asked specifically for their opinion on certain cases, including Roe v. Wade.
Correct.
But without having a case presented to them to make a comment on, they were just asked to comment in general on whether they would, at any point in time in the future, make a decision on Roe v.
Right, and the thing is, what people have to realize is that judges are not politicians, right? We're not running for Congress, we're not running for Senate, we're not running for, like to be a U.S. senator or to be a U.S. congressman or a member of the state legislature. So whenever you're running for a position of that sort, you need and must state a position, right? You're going to say, if you elect me, here are the things that I'm going to do. The thing about judges is that when people elect us, they're really electing us for our character. They're electing us for our integrity. They're electing us for our jurisprudential approach to the law, right? They're electing us for basically, our ability to perform as judges. And I think what it really comes down to is that people have to have respect for the system. And judges have to follow the laws and they have to follow the rules. Because ultimately, if you're a judge, and as we were talking about kind of what happens in these confirmation hearings, if you give a predisposition on any matter of any kind, you're not really being a judge, right? Because ultimately, how can you, if you've given a predisposition, if you've said that I see this or I see that or I feel this way or I feel that way, then how is it that people are going to have any trust in the integrity of the system, right? Because it's critical. What is the most important thing that a judge has to do? And I realize during these very tumultuous, during these very intense and very difficult times, do you know what the most important thing, Bart, that a judge has to be? There's only one thing that a judge has to be. And I have to say, during very difficult times, very intense times, intense situations, intense circumstances, there is one quality that a judge has to have. One quality and one quality, period. You know what that is?
What?
Fairness. Has to be fair. And what does it mean to be fair? Fair means that you don't have any preconceived notions. Fair means that you are going to listen to all the stakeholders. I always say as a judge, and I've been doing this for a while right now, and on the cases that I hear, I always want to make sure that as I do the work, I always want to make sure that people might say, no matter what case I'm presiding over, they might say, I either agree with Justice Bernstein or I disagree with Justice Bernstein, but what I want them to say is, he treated me fairly, right? He treated me fairly. I might disagree with his viewpoint, I might disagree with his perspective, I might disagree with his interpretation, but the one thing about Justice Bernstein is, he listened to me, he heard me, he gave every opportunity to every side to be heard, and heard in an appropriate, fair way. And even though I might agree or disagree with how he ruled, the one thing that you have to make sure is that people believe that they were treated fairly and with respect. So the one thing I would say about this case that we're talking about is, no matter how high tensions are, no matter how intense it is, the courts are going to do this well. They're going to hear the stakeholders. They're going to make sure that people are heard. They're going to make sure that it's briefed. And whatever the courts decide, wherever this goes, the thing I can promise people is it will be done fairly.
You also have to determine whether it is legal by the definition established by the Constitution for constitutional issues, like the case we were just talking about, Roe v.
Correct.
Roe v.
And
Wade.
the big question again comes down to where, this is going to be a matter, and this will happen in all the states, not just in Michigan, but it'll happen in all the states, where basically it will be decided as it pertains to what is in the state constitution, right? Because, the state constitution and the federal constitution, one governs the state, one governs the federal government, but the state constitution is basically governing the state of Michigan. So the question is, and the courts will have to determine, what does the state constitution say on this matter?
There is one case recently decided, I think you can comment on.
If it's decided, it's fair game,
It's
Bart. Let me tell you
decided.
something. If it's decided, we can rock on.
You, as a court, unanimously said former Governor Snyder and other state officials cannot.
Oh, let's roll.
be-
This is the Flint
yeah,
water case,
Flint
right?
water.
We
They-
can talk about
they-
this.
they
Oh,
can-
yeah.
So they can't be charged with crimes?
Well, okay, so let me go through it, right? I love it because seriously, what's great about being a judge, and I want to emphasize this, is that we love to talk about this stuff. And once it's decided, it is fair game. So,
Okay.
you know what I mean? Once that case is out there, Bart, we can rock and roll all day long on this case. So let's go through, and there is a little bit of a complication with this case, and that makes it a little complicated. complicated, but let's get to that in a second. So let's talk about what happened, right? So this is the story of the Flint water case and ultimately how the court reached its decision. The issue with that case is that what is critical about our criminal justice system is what you would call the grand jury process, right? So basically, if you are charged with a crime, the idea is that you have to go before the government can act. The notion of a grand jury is that the citizens oversee it, right? The idea is that we are not like, we're not like the Star Chamber back in England, right? Where basically the government can do it. The idea is that the citizens are supposed to have a say in whether the criminal justice process begins. That's the idea of the grand jury, where the government has to basically put forth their case to a grand jury of the citizens, right? Of the citizens, of your peers. And the citizens then determine, hey, it's not the government, it's the citizenry that's overseeing the government to make sure that if the indictment goes forward, that it's just and fair and appropriate. What happened in the Flint case with the various situation was they didn't go through the normal grand jury process. They used a judge, kind of a one-man grand jury situation. And the reason that that's concerning is because there is a cornerstone of criminal justice which says that, listen, you have a grand jury for a reason, you have the citizens on that jury for a reason, and that it's not supposed to be a member of the government. It's not supposed to be done by an individual government official. The whole concept is that it needs to be done by the citizens of our state. And in this situation, what ultimately occurred was they didn't go through the traditional process. And my concern about this is that if you're going to have a case of this magnitude, right, like especially in a case which is this significant, I think the court basically said that it's very important that you adhere to and uphold the regular criminal justice process and adhere to it in all of its tenets. And I think that's why the court basically said that you have to throw out the charges. Now, one area that is going to get complicated that I can't comment on because this is the interesting element about, that's why I love being a judge, is because honestly, Bart, you spend your entire day thinking. That's what I like. Like, you are constantly thinking. And that's what makes it such a unique and exciting position. So now the next question, and this I can't comment on, but just to kind of keep you guys excited, right? It's kind of like a stay tuned, right? So this is the part that's going to come next. But again, I can't comment or give a position on it. But here's the thing, you got to stay tuned. This is where it gets exciting, right? Because now the question has become, is there an issue with statute of limitations, right? So when you get into a statute of limitations issue, the question now becomes that the court will have to decide, since the charges were dismissed, if you're bringing new charges, one could argue, is that a violation of the statute of limitation? But if you're refiling and it's part of the existing case, does that not create a statute problem? So that's the next issue that's really going to have to be decided, is where does this fall as it pertains to the statute of limitations? And is the refiling or what happens next, is that a part of the legacy case or is that a new case? Because if it's a new case, that creates a set of questions about the statute, whereas if it's an old case, it doesn't. So stay tuned, because the court's going to have to determine, is it new or is it existing? So stay tuned as we kind of move forward. But honestly, that's what we do as judges, Bart, is that especially on very intense cases, very challenging cases, very difficult cases, ultimately, it's really my job as a Supreme Court justice to make sure that the procedure is followed and followed the way the founders intended for it to be followed. And ultimately, judges' job is to make sure that the government does its job. And in that case, the court felt very strongly, as it pertains to the original case about the one-man grand jury, that the court, as I wrote in my opinion, because I'm just simply quoting my opinion, on cases of that size, of that magnitude, you're setting an example that the government cannot cut corners.
All right, well, we've got our assignment. We've got to get you up in a
Stay
hot air
tuned.
balloon.
You got to have me back. I got to
We'll
tell you
have you
something.
back.
Here's the thing. I want to tell you, just to keep your audiences excited, there are so many exciting cases and so much intensity at the Supreme Court that when you have me back, because I love coming to Jackson, totally going on the hot air balloon, and I just can't wait to go to the high school football game. You know, I promise you, whenever I come, whenever you invite me, there will be no shortage of material.
All right, we'll look forward to having you back soon.
Thank you. God bless you all.
Good to see you. Thanks so much. From the Michigan Supreme Court, Justice Richard Bernstein.